When it comes to The Walking Dead, no figure is more controversial than the character of Negan Smith. Many fans attribute the decline of the show to his introduction, which directly led to the deaths of Abraham and fan favorite Glenn. But many others also consider Negan to be one of the best, if not the best, character on the show. And just about everyone can agree that Negan is easily the most entertaining and charismatic character in the series. Now, wherever you land on that spectrum, it's quite clear that from a narrative perspective, Negan is now a redeemed character that has managed to atone for his sins during the Saviors and All-Out War arcs. But that's not the Negan I want to talk about in this video. As a matter of fact, I want to tackle Negan as the leader of the infamous Saviors. Was Negan's philosophy, at that point in the story, ethically right or permissible? And was he an effective leader? Let's begin by covering the very fundamentals of Negan's ethical and leadership philosophies. Negan Smith's view of the world could be boiled down to a very simple axiom, being that might makes right. This is pretty much explained to Rick by Negan himself during the iconic lineup scene.
No matter what, you don't mess with the New World Order. New World Order is this, and it's really very simple. So even if you're stupid, which you very may well be, you can understand it. You ready? Here goes, pay attention. Give me your shit, or I will kill you.
Now, clearly this isn't a verbatim statement, but Negan clearly implies that this is a world where only the strong survive, where only the strong can take what they want. After all, Negan himself told Dwight that you earn what you take.
Finish the job. I haven't earned it yet, right?
What the hell are you talking about? You earn what you take.
We have an orange situation.
This belief extends to how the Saviors are organized as a group, which is a clear example of social Darwinism. Another core aspect of Negan's philosophy is the importance of rules. This is a man who clearly understands why social contracts exist. People living in a state of anarchy grant powers to a governing body in order to secure safety or liberty from the tyranny of total freedom. The rules that Negan is so adamant about are akin to the rule of law, for in the eyes of any educated or enlightened man, there can be no freedom without law. Negan also views rules to be necessary in the sense that they prevent what he deems to be unethical, while also preventing incompetence.
What's about to happen is gonna be hard to watch. I don't want to do it. I wish I could just ignore the rules and let it slide, but I can't. Why? That is right. We survive. We provide security to others. We bring civilization back to this world. We are the saviors. But we can't do that without rules. Rules are what make it all work. I know it's not easy.
Now, the last aspect of Negan's philosophy is that people are a resource.
People are a resource. Money on the table. People are the foundation of what we are building here!
Except that he often forgets to mention that he views people to be a resource for the strong to exploit. He doesn't ask communities to work with him, he asks them to work for him. He asks them not to just provide for him, but rather he demands that they belong to him.
You answer to me. You provide for me.
Provide for you.
You belong to me. Right. Right. That is the look I wanted to see.
This is even shown to us by how Negan stripped his people of their individuality by getting them to accept the title of being Negan.
Who are you?
Negan.
Who are you?
Negan. Who are you?
Negan. You see that? I am everywhere.
At the end of the day, Negan's philosophy on labor and human capital is one of forced servitude or enslavement. In short, Negan was an iron-fisted dictator. To see this, we merely just have to look at how his saviors, quote, saved people. When the saviors arrived at the doorstep of sovereign communities, they often overpowered them or intimidated them into forced labor. The subjugated tribes were then levied a 50% tax on all resources, in exchange for protection that rarely materialized.
Now, we were gonna kill him for you, to remind you of the service we can provide. And you cleaned up the mess yourselves. Good on you.
Well, we must have picked up some skills from your people. If you think about it, you still saved us. Right?
Well, that's a nice way to look at it. I appreciate that.
And to add insult to injury, this rate was always subject to change at the behest of Negan.
Oh yeah, your giant man-sized balls. No threatening us. Listen, I like you. So I don't want to go hard proving a point here. You don't want that. I said half your shit, and half is what I say it is. I'm serious. Do you want me to prove how serious? Again?
Now, Negan may have truly believed that he was saving people, but the reality of his leadership was actually quite bad. You see, a prison labor camp will feed you and keep you kinda safe-ish. But in a prison labor camp, you are not free. Now, typically, you have to do something wrong to end up in prison. But in the case of the saviors, you get to be in a proverbial prison for merely existing. Because to the saviors, you are a resource that's worth exploiting. The quote, safety they provide is never granted by consent either. The saviors didn't save people, they actively hunted them and enslaved them. And they certainly weren't good-faith negotiators either. They were oppressive predators. When we look at the sanctuary itself, we see that its occupants were divided into a class system. Negan and his inner circle, or lieutenants, garnered the vast majority of the tributes collected from the subjugated communities. The workers, on the other hand, had to work long hours in order to accumulate points in some cheap finance system, so that they could then exchange said fiat currency for commodities and necessities. The sanctuary was, in itself, just another subjugated community, which is why the structure was designed to look dark and gloomy. It wasn't a safe haven, it was a fucking labor camp. And if you wanted to be promoted to the inner circle, you had to not only lick Negan's boot, but you had to be strong in his eyes. Survival of the fittest. Might makes right. This is social Darwinism, or at least a very watered-down version of it. Fans of Negan and the Saviors often point out Negan's rules against rape as proof that the Saviors and Negan weren't too bad. Yet Negan had multiple wives that he didn't seemingly rape, but he did coerce them into being his sex objects. If they rejected him, they would end up on the assembly line, or far worse. It may not look like it, but that is virtually no different than rape, because these sexual or interpersonal relationships were never built on consent. But Negan could do it, despite what he hypocritically espoused, because his might allegedly made him right. Remember folks, his wives tried to fucking poison him.
You know I don't want anyone here that doesn't want to be here, right? So if you want to leave and go back to Mark, you can. But what can't you do?
Cheat on me.
That is exactly right. You can't cheat on me. There's plenty of other gals who would love to take your place, and there's a few job openings that I can think of. You want to go back to Mark and your mom? Hell, I'll put you all on the same job.
No. I will stay. I'm sorry.
You know what that means, right?
Yes. I love you, Negan.
Of course you do, darling.
We told her that you were going to help us, and she
Pump
says
your
that
brakes, Red. Do not insult my intelligence, Frankie. Said pills aren't for Amber, said pills are for Negan. That's why he wanted to.
Didn't he kill your friends?
Several.
People who spoke out against the system or who failed Negan in a notable manner were often punished excessively. Instead of a standard prison cell, they were often exposed to violent and humiliating punishments, death, and even solitary confinement, where prisoners were often subjected to endless audible torture. Some even had their wives taken from them and given to Negan. Instead of treating people humanely, Negan and his saviors often inflicted unjustifiable harm. Instead of attempting to rehabilitate people, the saviors often terminated them, enslaved them, dehumanized them, or kept them under their heel. And who could omit the fact that Negan's system did not allow for a democratic process to exist? It truly was an autocratic system where power was either passed down when Negan died or when someone managed to kill Negan, which is again a system based on the concept of social Darwinism.
I'm still gonna give you your shot. You wanna be the man, you gotta beat the man. You can do that. Hell, you should be the man.
That clip is even foreshadowed when Negan killed that snake in the grass.
And then there's you. The guy who waited for Rick to be gone so he could sneak over and talk to me to get me to do his dirty work so he could take Rick's place. So I gotta ask, if you want to take over, why not just kill Rick yourself and just take over?
What? No, I don't...
You know what I'm thinking? Because I have a guess. It's because you got no guts.
Negan's leadership, while successful in the short run, was always doomed to fail. People were never truly loyal to him, but rather they merely followed him because of the fear he instilled in them. When the opportunity presented itself, he often had to contend with traitors. His leadership caused an entire community to disappear, heading out to the shores of the East Coast. His leadership led to the formation of an entire rebellious coalition. His leadership did nothing but bring out the worst in people as opposed to bringing out the best.
You have guns. We have deal?
It occurs to me that I've not yet received the full definition of an apology. I feel like I've gotten some transgressional acknowledgement. The guns certainly cover restitution. But what I'm not yet feeling is the remorse.
There is remorse. There is remorse.
No! Say it again!
There is remorse, you son of a bitch!
Oh, no, no, no.
I don't think you mean that.
Light it up, gents.
Light it up now!
We did it. Negan, we did it. The girl, she confessed. She was sent by the king. Exactly like
He said to let her walk. He gave a direct order.
Negan, you know these things. My process takes time.
Your process?
Yes, Simon, my process. Who determined the location of the hidden arms cache at the hilltop?
I would have found that shit.
Oh, really? Your keen sense of observation, your emotional intelligence.
Blah, 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 blah. This is what I'm talking about, Negan. Using these highfalutin words to cover up what we all know you really are. A Slavic, psychopathic, nut job.
Oh, my God, I refuse to participate in these childish
Kids?
conversations.
Kids! Is a line we do not cross.
While he may have been a tactically and strategically sound leader, his very philosophy was never sustainable in the long run, because it was built on a cult of personality and fear, as opposed to being built on a democratic social contract and voluntary association and cooperation. So his philosophy on leadership was clearly wrong. Ethically speaking, one would struggle to find a respectable, deontological system of morality and ethics that would endorse his methods. Consequentialist systems or utilitarian systems would also scoff at his philosophy, as his methods had no concern or empathy for the happiness and or well-being of his people or strangers. And while he may have had the best of intentions, the road to hell really is paved with the good intentions of men like Negan.
We kill people. No, this is about what you did to us. What you did to so many people. How you made people live for you. How you put people under your boot.
I save people.
Michonne?
He needs to know.
It is abundantly clear that Negan was wrong on an ethical level, and I would be shocked if I had to explain to you all why slavery, sexual exploitation, extreme social inequality, and despotism is wrong. That ought to go without an explanation in the year of 2024, because it ought to be common knowledge at this point. But I just know that some diehard Savior Negan fans will argue that a strong man or totalitarian leader is needed during the apocalypse. After all, Rick himself was a dictator in Season 3. But Rick was leading a group out in the wild, outside the confines of any civilization. Negan was leading an actual civilization. They were self-sustaining, secure within shelter, with multiple outposts and both food and water sources. There were rules, punishments, diplomatic relations, and so forth. Negan and his saviors were at the point where they weren't in the wilderness. It wasn't about mere survival anymore. While the military is best run from top to bottom, society is better managed from bottom to top. The dictatorship worked in the wild but was rightfully discarded once the prison community was properly established. Anyways, with all of that said, one could give some credit to Negan in the areas where he was right. Law is needed for a society to function. Might may not make right, but without it the righteous cannot exist. And people certainly are a resource, but it's not a resource to be exploited but rather nurtured and truly protected, because people are more than just a mere resource. But enough with the kind words. The sad fact is that Negan and his saviors could have been heroes. They could have fostered cooperative relations with the communities they opted to subjugate. They could have lowered their tax rate to a reasonable level while actually providing safety. They could have connected all the communities and, in doing so, could have fostered more trade and a positive alliance of tribes that all worked together to bring back civilization. Their methods, Negan's methods, were wholly unnecessary, inefficient, cruel, and deeply immoral. Be that as it may, many online tend to alarmingly side with Negan when it comes to his initial conflict with Rick Grimes. Yes, the Grimes crew attacked Negan first, as mercenaries fighting for food. Yes, Rick's group killed men in their sleep. But here's the brutal fucking truth. The Saviors would have eventually found Alexandria, especially considering that Daryl and Abraham already ran into them before the Hilltop deal. They were never going to be interested in negotiating in good faith, just as they would never have left Alexandria alone in a state of total freedom. They were the predators in the dark woods, and attacking them was more than just warranted. When it comes to the termination of the so-called innocents at that outpost, the blame does not fall on Rick's group, but rather on the leader that made such a conflict necessary for the Hilltop. The attack on the outpost really was an example of a justified war. Seriously, would you really blame a slave for hiring a hitman to kill his excessively abusive master? Of course you wouldn't. And no, Negan was not being kind to Rick's group at the lineup. Negan didn't spare them, he literally enslaved them. A fate so ghastly that many would prefer death. That's why they eventually chose to risk their lives in a war with Negan and his saviors. American viewers ought to understand this the most, as the mantra of, "Give me liberty or give me death," ought to pop up in their minds. Negan never cared for the men he lost. He viewed Rick's group to be more valuable as a resource than the lives of the men and women under his command. The Grimes crew were never the villains. They were the unfortunately arrogant heroes who bit off more than they could chew. And Negan himself, he was not some victim. He was not someone worthy of admiration. He deserved to not only be imprisoned, but to be punished. If not for his influence as a former leader, which could have made him a martyr, death may have been an appropriate punishment for him. That said, the post-savior Negan is a man who has atoned for his sins and has redeemed himself. If there is a version of Negan that is worth respecting, it is that very version of the character. Because unlike the governor, Negan was never truly too far gone. Anyways, that's all I have to say about this topic. If you enjoy this sort of content, please like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification icon as well, that way you don't miss out on newly posted videos, made by yours truly. Also, please leave me your thoughts in the comments section. I do read them on my free time. And last but certainly not least, please consider becoming a member of the channel. It's the best way to support what I do, which is entertaining all of you. With that said, I'm Captain Gold and I hope to see you in my next video.